become a greater source of pains and anxiety and publicity to the Nigerians than the notion of restructuring, or some people will call it devolution of power. The situation with Africa's most populous nation, Nigeria, seems to be tilting towards a dangerous one, with the agitation from different regions, especially the clamor for secession from the southeast, which is gradually, as some people will say, tearing the fabrics of our single unity. But what really is restructuring? Every citizen, interest groups, nationalities, and government officials are busy at different attempts to define the term restructuring, and I believe you have your own definition. Centrifugal forces of regional, religious, economic divisions are having a field day profiling their own suggestions. This is because the institutions of the state designed to rein everyone in are either too weak or too incapacitated by their own internal contradictions to function effectively. The martial culture of militarized national psyche persists in virtually all the institutions of state. And for restructuring to be successful, we must first look at the challenges with the institutions in Nigeria. Now, how did these things, all of it, degenerate into the present levels that we are? How can the weak institutions be made strong? And there are some of the these are some of the pressing questions, and I believe you have more. But we'll be interrogating on the program today some of these issues. And to discuss, I have joining me in the studio two young gentlemen, passionate Nigerians, on the institutions of government in Nigeria and how we can get it right for a better future. I have Atoye Ariyo, a politician and a public analyst, and joining him, I have Livingstone Wechie, a rights activist who has also joined us. Gentlemen, you are welcome to the program.
Oh,
thank you so much for joining me on the program.
Thanks for having me.
Now, we'll be going into the discussions shortly, but before we begin to go into the discussions, we have to see some of the policy statements made by the president on the issue of national unity, which he says is dear to him, and the statement from a former director of a Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission, Professor Patrick Lumumba, during a summit in Nigeria on rules of legislators in building a strong institution in the country. Let us take a listen.
Nigerians' unity is settled and not negotiable. We shall not allow irresponsible elements to start trouble, and when things get bad, they run away and settle others with the responsibility of bringing back order, if necessary, with their blood. Every Nigerian has the right to live and pursue his business anywhere in Nigeria without let or hindrance.
You may not know, but 1 out of every 5 Africans is a Nigerian. And the reason, in my view, why Africa continues to totter in the manner that it does is because Nigeria has never realized our potential. The day Nigeria realizes our potential, that is the day that Africa will rise. So we are here today also to remind Nigeria that it must play her leadership role, not only in this region, but in Africa, by demonstrating by what and did that Nigeria will be in the forefront in the fight against corruption. The first thing that we must do is that we must strengthen institutions. Institutions are at the very heart of the sustained fight against corruption. Your President, His Excellency Muhammadu Buhari, is on the right path. He has given us the clarion call. He is now recognized the world over as one of the chief fighters against corruption. But I can tell you that no matter how well intentioned he is not going to succeed unless you support him as the legislators. He is not going to succeed unless the institutions are strengthened. And in any event, the maximum he can stay in office is 2 terms. And let me tell you one thing about those who engage in graft. They have the patience that is amazing. If they can sleep quietly for 8 years, only to emerge as greater monsters in the 9th year. And therefore, what we must do is to create institutions that defy time. Those institutions must be institutions that are recognized by the law. If it is the institution of parliament, it must stay strong. If it is the institution of the judiciary, it must be purged of the men and women who engage in graft. If it is the institution of the executive, it must be strengthened. If it is the EFCC, it must be strengthened. If it is the civil society, it must be strengthened. It is only institutions that defy time that will ensure that we succeed in the fight against corruption. The second thing that we must do is that we must have a raft of laws which ensure that those who want to do things that are detrimental to the society are punished, and punished swiftly in accordance with the law, and they are not allowed to be unleashed to the unsuspecting public. And I am happy to note that our representatives from Europe are here. For a long time, Africans who stole from Africa had safe havens in Europe. It is my joy that even Europe now is beginning to close the doors. Under the World Bank, we have mutual legal assistance if we can ensure that those avenues are closed so that they cannot keep their money away. What amazes me is that these individuals kept their ill-gotten wealth in numbered accounts. Not their wives, not their husbands knew. So that when they died, this money was enjoyed by other civilizations. We must now ensure that those who serve in the public service do not hold accounts outside of this country. If they love this country so much that they serve her, why is it that they do not have faith in having their money in this part of the world? These are things that can only be done if we have sound laws. The third thing is that we must look at our education system. What are we teaching in the 143 universities in Nigeria? What are we teaching in our high schools? Are we teaching our young men and women that you can be celebrated simply because you have acquired wealth without its source being given? We must interrogate our curriculum, and we must involve everybody, religious leaders, traditional leaders, because how can it be that amongst the various peoples of Nigeria, you would not allow your daughter or your son to marry a thief who has stolen a goat, but a thief who has stolen naira is celebrated? We must give the goat and the naira equal value, because he's a thief is a thief.
Well, Lumumba making the thing very, very clear there. We could have put it more succinctly. The need for institutional development. He's not the only one. You recall that even the Americans have come close here. Remember when the Clintons visited the Secretary of State then also, all of them telling us that we should create and respect and develop institutions rather than strong individuals. Well, in the opinion of some political figures in the country, the solution to the many challenges faced by Nigeria today is restructuring. One person who feels strongly on this is Shehu Musa Gabam. He is of the view that the manner at which Nigeria can achieve self-sufficiency is for all to understand the need for strong institutions. Let's take a listen to him.
When you listen to some of those actors behind calling for restructuring and so on and so forth, you have to look at what they really mean by restructuring. So, Nigerians, in their peculiar way, call for issues at a time that it doesn't pleases them. When it pleases them, it's fizzled out completely. That is the kind of mentality we have as a society. Most of the restructuring they are calling for is simply because of the political dimensions that have changed. No more, no less. If they are in a position of authority, they will not effect those changes. And there are issues that are purely issues of National Assembly. It's not about rhetorics and so on and so forth. Even the National Conference they are talking about, they are subject to what the National Assembly will do with whatever deliberation that they have done. So yes, the contributions are allowed, but you cannot use an avenue that was generated to make issues, conversations on national issues as emotional, sentimental, and you base it sometimes on ethnic or religious ground, and you think you are championing the cause of nationhood. It doesn't happen. We have to be rational. We have to believe in this country. Every tangible issue you have raised, tag it to a nation building. But don't tag it to either ethnic base or religious, because you assume that the system has changed you and there is an imbalance in the system. And so you have a ground to launch an offense or to launch a chaotic environment to an existing system. If APC is in government today, tomorrow it might be PDP. So you don't pop up an issue that tomorrow might also haunt you. Yes, as a nation, I have said, it's stage by stage. When we get there, we'll deal with it. Just like the way people are talking about the state police. I believe in the state police. We can start it in some state and see how it works. Societies that have developed over time have gone through such challenges. So we are not a static nation. We move from one end to the other. Our development wasn't like this before. Even before 1999, the level of development of Nigeria is very low. So a nation moves on. And as you are moving on, naturally with sound education, with a lot of exposure, with a lot of international dynamics that will come into play, a lot of things will change. So people should not overshoot their shadows. You have to go according to the speed of your society, according to the speed of your nation, and so that you can achieve the goal, the objective that is being targeted to move the society forward. It's not about emotions or sentiments. Why we are going through what we are going through is simply because the government do not bring out policies and programs that will control some of these behaviors. It came in as a loose system, so everybody is doing what he wants. It is now that the government have developed interest into it and want to start controlling the excessive behavior of people who are taking the advantage of the freedom to do whatever they want to do. Every society that allows people to do what they want to do, you will end up in a very chaotic situation. That's what led to the kind of hate speech you are talking about. That's what led to the kind of ultimatum you are talking about. That's what led to the kind of Biafran behavior you are talking about. Simply because the system is not tidying itself to the doctrine of what is necessary and what is not necessary. Unless the government believes strongly that yes, freedom is critical, the National Assembly have passed, but it has its own limitations. Those limitations must be enforced, not just from the private individuals, but from the government itself. Because if a reckless statement is coming from a government, you cannot deny also citizens to say that what you are saying is reckless, is also a violation of my own freedom as a citizen. So both sides must understand their own limitations. A government first must behave responsibly, must respond responsibly, must react responsibly. But once a system is reckless, and there's no justice and fairness, that's what creates an avenue for abuse of law or disrespect to the law by other segment of the society. So both sides must understand that everything has a limitation. There is nothing that is unlimited on earth. So the government itself must begin to adjust, must begin to allow to content some of the excesses of government officials, some of the reckless statement coming from the government officials, so that it will look like setting the example, setting the agenda. Then before you can go and deal with other people. But definitely I agree, some of the excesses of individuals, what they say is completely detrimental to our corporate existence. That I agree with.
The Nigeria of our dream, the Nigeria we need, is the united, indissoluble and cohesive Nigeria which guarantees equity, fairness, justice and prosperity for its citizens. That is our focus on people, politics and power. It is fresh, insightful, impactful. It's a must watch. People, politics and power on AIT. Join us to build bridges of unity.
Thank you for joining us, for remaining with us on the platform. Shehu Gabam, the man you just listened to just now, is a politician, and he says it to the root, developing the general framework of the institutions such that everyone, including the government, is respectable and respectful to all the other segments. Well, we have a program, People, Politics, and Power, like you heard, that serves to galvanize all these views with a view to deepening our unity, make it possible for Nigerians to have a country where unity, not just unity on paper, but we have unity where justice and equity and fair play thrives. I still have in the studio my guests with whom I will be interrogating the issues here. Atoye Ariyo is a politician and public analyst, and also have joining him Livingstone Wechie, a rights activist. Thank you again for joining. Let's take a look at the. It does appear that if institutional building were to be like constructing a building, if it were to be like constructing a building in a site, then you go there and see how the foundations are laid, how the pipes are connected, the iron rod and all the cement, how they are all mixed together. Maybe the first day you see the level, the second day you see the level. After about 6 months, you see begin to take shape. Is institutional building like that?
No, basically, it's not like that. But at the same time, structurally, in terms of, comparing, you can say, you can give that analogy. But in the real interpretation of it, because when you're talking about building institutions, it comes via lawmaking, policies of government, sometimes even common sense that becomes over time
a culture of the people.
Culture of people becomes a convention of a people, and it becomes a sort of institution in that order. However, in what you call it, liken it to that analogy, you know that the building, you have to lay the foundation, you have to put the concrete, you have to build on it. Fine. You can also say that in terms of building institutions, you have to, put a bill in place that has to be looked at by the parliament, has to be passed by the parliament, then that has to be assented by the president, and of course it becomes a law, and people have to go by it. However, I think what is ailing us in Nigeria is just like everybody have said it, and it appears that we don't really want to go that path, simply because we are used to the idea of big guys taking advantage of the system.
The strong individuals.
Yes, the big guys taking advantage of the system, and this actually started way back after the military incursion. This country died in a way, one way or the other, after that May 24 promulgation of the unitary decree by Wechie. And when the khaki boys started entering into our system, the Praetorian Guards, they started putting in place about the culture of the military. From the culture of the military, we started hearing the ex-generals. And of course, the big man things started entering and started seeing themselves as larger than the state in terms of, churning out decrees and dictating the pace. Unfortunately, the tragedy of this dispensation was the fact that this fourth republic, the first person that came on board was a former military ruler. So building this,
like a carryover.
Yeah. So building the institution was never a priority. It was about giving the political executive he had in terms of dictating the pace. What the president says, that's what it must be. A clear departure from the way it has been done in developed and advanced countries, where you put in place clear rules, policies, and it has to be followed, including the president even have to be the #1 person that has to even obey this, and a certain clear direction for the state. But we had that misgivings and that mistake by allowing that to happen, because believe me sincerely, is the whole country is culpable for allowing that. We have to look at the antecedent of people before we allow them, to actually
now there's
gain power. And that's you realize that from the Obasanjo's period, we start having it immediately Yar'Adua came in. We start having some semblance of people talking about building institutions and the need for us to respect this institution into the Jonathan's era. But again, we are back to another military, pseudo-military era where people now, you start hearing the president has ordered, the president has given this order, all those kind of military terminology that has now dominated even the media space, and coming from the kind of the way that even some press statements are structured from the presidency. So it's a whole big problem, and I believe that we're not just going to talk about it. We are having a good opportunity as we move towards 2019 to start doing soul searching in terms of how do we get out of this wood. It has to do with even who is going to be the next president of this country. It has to do with how we want to actually build and frame this country, and that's one of the reasons why the agitation over restructuring has been very, very tough, simply because things are not working. I believe that probably if we had had very strong institutions, it will have reduced certain agitations, which, for instance, it will have curtailed issue of nepotism.
Let's take a look at some of the hallmark of the institutions. I mean, those things that good institutions can generate. First, a nation with good institutions have almost fair play and fairness in the manner of their existence. If you talk of restructuring the power base, there is a sense of belonging that everybody will have. If you're talking about spending government resources, institutions are set up to be fair to all that is concerned in the matter and in the other. And we need legal frameworks for this. But ironically, there are some instances we know. I will cite one example just now, where there are legal frameworks that can assist in promoting this fair play, openness as an institution, but we disregard them. The National Procurement Commission, for instance, was supposed to be an organ that will award contracts in Nigeria. I mean, it's an organ, or it's a law. It is not the Federal Executive Council, or as the Constitution will call it, the Executive Council of the Federation that awards contracts. And what we see every Wednesday at the Federal Executive Council is government coming out with contract awards. The Federal Executive Council has constituted itself into a contract awarding body. They have renegated the commission that is by law set up, and if you take a look at that law, you'll be amazed at what we are missing. Every segment of the society is supposed to be, including the media, civil society groups, the institutional framework of the various professional bodies, all of them are supposed to sit down and say, yes, where do we get the roads to in Nigeria? If we are going to award this road contract, where will it lead us to? We will begin to put Nigeria on the map, for instance, on the table, and say, if we connect this road to the other road. But what we have now is the Federal Executive Council, the governors, all of themselves, sitting down in their parlor and deciding what. How do we get government to even obey the institutional framework and laws that have been made to enable all to have a sense of belonging and do the things right?
It goes back to an issue. The union is not negotiable. That assertion from power is very fundamental, and it challenges the sensibility of the citizenry. If you go down to the basics, it has occurred to me, Nigeria has never had a democratically written constitution. Every of our constitutional document has been doctored by the military. No civilian administration in Nigeria has written our constitution before. As a matter of fact, the union had its very exacerbated faulty lines as at 1966, when the original constitutions collapsed. And what you see now is an offshoot from the, do I call it a scatterbrain arrangement from the collapse of the from the original constitutions. And when you deal with the subject of building institutions,
yes,
it's very deep. Let me give you an analogy. I called a lecturer of mine, Professor O.C. Nwebo, and I told him, sir, did you hear what happened in Kenya recently? He said, what happened? I said, the Supreme Court has just nullified the presidential election. You know what he said? He said, that is constitutionalism. And that's what he has schooled me on, and I'm doing a lot of work on. And he said, look, what is constitutionalism? the establishment and entrenchment of strong institutions of states through democratic processes and means. And in doing so, you have an institution of the judiciary, the executive, as well as the legislature coming under that arrangement. Like they say in constitutional law, you can have a constitution without constitutionalism, but you cannot have a constitutionalism without a constitution. And what that indicates is that for a strong institution to be in place and drive what we are talking about here, it has to come through a constitutional process. Now, that constitution also, to be able, for that constitution itself to be able to drive that institutional framework, it must necessarily evolve
from the people
through a democratic process. This is a constitutional law principle. And that is where we are getting it all wrong in Nigeria today. And that's why the mantra of the union is non-negotiable puts us on the path of danger. Several scholars have classed Kenya today as having the best and most advanced constitution today in Africa, seconded by Ghana and then South Africa and then a few others queuing behind. The reason is because Kenya has taken time to develop a constitutional system where, assuming appointment goes to the male fold, okay, let's look at the gender aspect.
Yeah.
If there is a 10 appointment slots, a certain number that goes to the male also provides that a certain number must go to the females. It's not a question of affirmative action. So, but the challenge now is, where do we go from here? How do we develop these institutions? These institutions can come through that same question that touches on our constitutional fault lines, that the union must be discussed. That idea that Nigerians have never had the chance to create or write a constitution that comes from them voluntarily. That voluntary, what do you call in law when you talk about creating an exception, or you create a system where people cannot, speak on a certain issue. In a democratic society, people must be allowed to speak on every issue.
Well, we commonly call here no-go areas. When
you don't do no-go areas, because that's why the fire has continued to burn. And that's why you've had the various agitations from the various regions. You come to the north, you have the Boko Haram, the OPC in the west. You come to the east, you have the Biafra and various Niger Delta agitations and so on. And people have been of the opinion, you read out in your introduction, they have called it several names: restructuring, diarchy, various others, devolution of powers. We are just dancing around, the major issue, which has to do with the union itself. And we don't want to go back to it. And for you to create a sustainable union that Nigeria that will give room for Nigeria as a state to develop strong institutions, it has to come by a voluntary discussion as to how we coexist. If you don't, let me give you an analogy about the creation of a company. A company is run by a memo and article of association. And the memo and article of association of a company is created by the trustees of that company and not the management. What we have in Nigeria is, in the case of management telling us how a company will be run, whereas the trustees themselves, who are owners of that company, in this case the citizens, have been denied the opportunity to discuss how that company will be run. And part of that danger is when we removed history from our academic curriculum. One of the greatest challenges and dangers to our coexistence today in Nigeria is the removal of history from our academic curriculum. Now, if you don't know where you're coming from, you won't know where. And that's why Yini Oshundara in his book, Eye of the Earth, said, looking back is looking forward. He said, looking back is the weapon to destroy the looming monster that has bedeviled the earth. So that agitation question to negotiate the union, which will now evolve the type of constitution that Nigerians have voluntarily accepted, far beyond the opinion that the constitution is forged by the we the people concept. You must allow the peoples of Nigeria from the various land-owning ethnic groups the opportunity to evolve for themselves.
Let me ask.
Sorry, sir. There is something you didn't. This idea, because we must not lose sight of that. This issue of the Federal Executive Council and the fact that Nigerians has not probably prioritized it, the idea of going to courts, in America, in some of those developed countries, they don't shy away from going to court. You know,
particularly when there's a basis
now,
to go to court.
People must go to court, even to the extent of the Supreme Court, for us to invalidate the action of the Federal Executive Council in terms of going against what the law says on the award of contract. If there is a law that talked about the National Procurement Council, and we believe that what the Federal Executive Council is doing is contrary to what the law stipulates. It is the duty of Nigerians, and that's one thing we must not shy away from. We must continue to interrogate the process. Where we're talking about restructuring, looking out for the space for us to have a saner nation where things work, because the whole thing is about a nation that works. Then we have to also use the process, the little space that's available, that is available for us, to ensure that we get the judiciary. I believe there is a firm pronouncement by the Supreme Court today. It is going to be very difficult for the Federal Executive Council again to continue to operate this charade, because it is against the law, and it is when the judiciary sometimes make pronouncement. It happens all over the world. Sometimes the executive wants to cut corners.
We have had the irony of this National Procurement Council, the irony of the continued disobedience of the law, is that this current government, when they were actually campaigning, said within 100 days,
absolutely,
within 100 days, they will set up the National Procurement Council. That
exposed the fact that the government is not fighting corruption. Because let me tell you, one of the reasons why they don't want to set it up is simply because the National Procurement Council will be able to sieve through some of the money that they are using as kickback in order to run some shows behind. To fight corruption, to start with, and they recognize that. That was why the APC made that commitment. They know that the National Procurement Council is very strategic to fighting corruption, from the source.
That's just a very tiny aspect. I just introduced that to let us know that when we are talking about restructuring, some persons think that one day, one early morning, somebody will just come from the sky and bring a restructuring to us. And bring a restructuring to us. Now he has laid a very strong foundation. Talking about which he has talked about the need to even go back to the basics, and that we cannot shy away from talking about the institutionalization of the system without talking about the basis of the existence of the system itself. Now, have we missed the road? Let me come to Ario. Have we missed the road? Is it a place we can go back to? We all know where we are now. We have regional constitutions. We have the Western Constitution, the North, the Midwest join eventually on the long run. And what we have after the 1966 coup was a demolition of what was. He has said the fact that we have not been able to come back together to ask ourselves what do we want to do, particularly after the military had left, is the basis of some of the agitation that we have.
You see, there is no global defined formula for how a nation should be governed. But there are irreducible minimum in terms of common sense for you to know that people want to govern or their own affairs to be governed in a particular order. As we're speaking, the people in the Southwest are in Ibadan, debating strongly, I believe, the governors and a good number of the stakeholders are in Ibadan today, talking about the issue of restructuring. And I believe that the Southwest is coming out to make a very profound statement about this, how we want our affairs to be governed. And that's exactly what I believe in some of the things he has talked about in terms of constitutionalism and some of what some of our actors have said about it. You see, when the president also one way or the other further instigated this agitation when he said the unity of the nation is settled. You see, there is nothing that is settled, not even in America, that a president of America will come out and say the unity of America is settled. It's not done anywhere. You see, what they have not been able to do is just like...
is it not the fear of disintegration that many people are afraid of?
Either fear of disintegration, what they don't understand is that if you try to macromanage the system in the way it is going... Let me give you an instance. Some parts of the country have been lucky that they have some of very big leaders, former military rulers who have been able one way or the other to hold this country in a particular order. You see, the generation that is coming, if care is not taken, if we don't restructure Nigeria now, this is the generation that will balkanize the nation. check the social media space, check the way people are reacting to issues. The only glorious opportunity we are having now is for these elders, these old men who are probably at their departure lounge, and probably we have one of them governing our nation, is for them to actually listen, to know that the only way as a nation we can move forward is for us to actually sit down and debate the existence of this nation. It is in debating, and I'm sure that is one of the reasons why the elders in the Southwest, that's what they are saying. You see, it doesn't make any sense when you see the younger ones, your children who are excelling abroad and they cannot excel within the nation. And they've come to look at it that there was a particular time prior 60-67 that this nation was working. And you see, when people gathered in Arewa House, let me tell you, they will always tell you their best moment was when Sadana was the premier of Northern region. The people in Southwest or in the West will tell you when Awolowo was there. So what happened during this period? There was a particular structure in place. We may not even need to go too far for us to start making reference to some of these developed nations, but things work at a particular point in time, and also it didn't work for over 50-51 years. We've been in this wilderness, having no way forward. So basically what we need to do is that, and even aside all these technicalities that we're talking about, if people say this is the way we want to be governed, you can't deny them that. You see, if you are from a particular part of the country and you believe that this is the way you want it, you can't impose it, on the people that the people have to be governed like that. And there are nations, there are nations that probably have been able to, settle this matter. And people should not be afraid of this idea of balkanization. Some of these leaders, they wedded and probably maybe, did away with their own wives and marry new wives. So they should not be afraid. But Nigerians believe, you see, what they need to do is to continue to offer superior argument. Why the unity of Nigeria
must be kept.
Must be kept, and it's better. It must be a superior narrative. In terms, just like this Biafra agitation, it's not going to go away, because we have not offered superior narrative to Biafra.
Now let me come to Wechie. Now, when we talk about I can feel the president,
yes,
and it's not the only one.
Yes.
Most of them in their category, in their group, in their age group, have labored for Nigeria before. They have fought a civil war, and in 1966 to 1977 war was not a tea party. Yeah. The primordial fear they have is, I hope this country will not go divided the way it was going. Yes. So when they say, we have settled the unity of Nigeria, we cannot negotiate it, is it not from this background that they are talking?
Well, that's a statement of power. That's my opinion. You say people, politics, and power.
Yes.
What is the statement of the people? When power makes a statement, what are the people saying? Bola Ige put this issue on the table, and he gave two options as an antidote to this chaos that we found ourselves in. And Bola Ige made the following statement. He said, look, if Nigeria must remain one, two questions must be answered. Have we agreed and have we voluntarily accepted to remain one? And if the answer is in the affirmative, yes, what will be the terms of our coexistence? That's the second leg of the antidote, of the question. And this is what we've always run away from. As I speak to you, just 2 days ago, the various agitating groups from the East met in Washington and have collapsed into a singular movement, from IPOB to MASSOB and various others, into what they call Lower Niger Independence Movement. This happened just 2 days ago in Washington. The Yorubas are meeting currently in the West.
In Ibadan.
In Ibadan. And you're
the Midwest arrangement is going on.
Jonathan,
the South arrangement is going on.
Things are happening. The land is on fire. Goodluck Jonathan made the same statement President Muhammadu Buhari made when he was president and set up the 2014 conference, that the union shall not be discussed. That is why I said it's a statement of power. But go back to the American War College report of, I think, is it 2012 or 2013, titled Nigeria's Unity in the Balance, where that report stated that Nigeria as currently constituted, that the dividing forces are stronger and more in number than the unifying forces. And he went on to say that the dividing forces are those who have been neglected and have demanded justice and equity in the system, whereas the unifying forces are those who have enjoyed and benefited from the system as it currently is constituted. Nigeria as currently constituted both gives room for corruption and protection for same, impunity and immunity. And that is why people are saying, let me tell you, no matter what rhetorics, No matter the policy statements you make as Nigeria is currently constituted, there is a system on ground that swallows up everyone that comes on board to govern. And that's why General Obasanjo would say at some point that even though you bring Jesus Christ to govern Nigeria, he will not succeed. Because Nigeria is built on a faulty foundation, and the people are saying, is either we discuss or we disperse. And you can't rule out the fact that these are languages from the various, extremes, and you must attend to them. Now, let me state that we are at a cutting edge as a nation. You've heard threats that if the constitution is not addressed as to writing a new constitution, or if the agitation and issues of self-determination is not addressed, from the east and from the west, they have said there will be no 2019 on the table. So you don't rule out these things. How do you govern people that are not with you?
Let's look forward, because the time is actually, like somebody said to me this morning, it's like there's fire burning and everybody is like not running. There's fire on the mountain and nobody is running. And that is what it appears. Now, let's quickly wrap up, because we have just 5 minutes to wrap up.
Yes.
Ario, where do we go from here? Now, we have a situation where Nigerians largely, if you ask me from my own vantage position as a journalist, largely Nigerians want to have this one united big Nigeria.
Yes.
There's hardly a group that is saying tear Nigeria apart without putting a condition to it that if we do this, we will drop our. Yeah. We have a Nigeria that is workable in our memory, that we have an image of a Nigeria that can work. We have a picture of a Nigeria that can really work. How do we get there?
Well, that's exactly what we talked about restructuring. You listed a good number of some of those factors that have been put in different semantics all before now. And when you put everything together, it has to talk about the word restructuring. What we need to do is to unbundle the term restructuring for us to be able to understand this thing in perspective.
The president has set up, the current government has set up the Air-Rufai committee to have
self-serving. It's at best self-serving.
You don't believe it?
I don't believe in their time. You see, this is exactly the mistake the military made. You see, a group of persons, just like when the National Assembly, some of these amendments to some of these constitutions, people have been telling them it's not going to work. We need a whole brand new constitution for us to function. And that is why we continue to, have impunity in the system. For instance, the common sense is no longer working. Look at what happened, which is trending, in the social media space. A serving minister, talking about the fact that he's going to support another person for 2019 presidential election. Yes. And you see, that's the
Minister for Women Affairs.
Yes, that has to do with our political culture. That was a critical vote of no confidence on the government. You see, it is a political culture in a civilized nation when the moment that as an appointee, the moment you no longer have the same political pedestal with the government of the power, you resign before you even make such a statement. But the reason why we continue to have all this, why DSS is fighting EFCC, is simply because part of this problem we're talking about. Right. And that's exactly what we are saying as a nation, that look, I would like to advise President Muhammadu Buhari and some of the people around him. They have a very good opportunity to listen, to concede, for people to discuss, for us to have a better nation. He will not be around. They seem as a very strong man from the north. Some of them will not be around in the next few years. And the nation, they don't want it back. And they don't want Nigeria to be divided.
Even if they are around at the age of 100, they may not be
able to stop what is coming. And you see, it is for the elders. You see, Ile-Ife, the Yoruba home, historically was created by the wisdom of the elder and the young people. And that's the way you can also build any nation. It is incumbent on our leaders to see that the raging fire that is coming, for us to sit down to avert it. We, for instance, Nigeria is projected to hit 300 million by 2040. Look at the north, look at the south, look at the army of youth who are coming out and making the whole country ungovernable in terms of lack of, peace and security. All right. So these are some of the things we have to look at. But if we restructure Nigeria, I tell you, we can turn all these challenges into abundance opportunities.
Now, let me give you the last opportunity to quickly make your own comment. Yes. We have examined all of them, raising the temperature up and painting a picture of a gloom if we do not quickly address the problem. Yes. But we are saying that as Nigerians, as Nigerians, the picture on ground is that we can actually work. This nation can work.
Provided.
Yes,
provided. That's why the law with several languages of law with a proviso. Provided. And South Africa is next door. And I maintain studies, CODESA, Council for Democratic South Africa, when South Africa was run by an apartheid constitution and the assets of the land-owning black nationality was sequestered. Through that same document, Mandela was in jail. Frederick de Klerk had to put up CODESA, where discussions took place, and they evolved a totally and brand new constitution that was acceptable and agreed by the peoples of South Africa voluntarily. Let's go to South Africa and study how they address their. In fact, they are closest in terms of an example of what we are currently experiencing. South Africa would not be where it is today if Frederick de Klerk and then the white minority had said that South Africa's union would not be negotiable. We must negotiate the union because that is the only way to go. You cannot properly give treatment to an health case until you diagnose and know, and then you prescribe what manner of treatment will be given. Nigeria, according to someone, is more or less, you know, in a life support system. And that's why you come up statistics from the judiciary, statistics from the legislature, statistics from the executive. You see things not working because the basics itself has not been addressed. And power says, no, that is the issue, but let's pretend like nothing is wrong and let's go on. And the rug is being removed from your feet. It's collapsing. People hold the opinion that Nigeria as a union, that the union is no more. But I believe that Nigeria can work. But this Nigeria as currently constituted is not the Nigeria of our dream. Okay. The Nigeria of our dream is that which people must voluntarily, as our founding fathers did, and as it was up to 1966, before the fraud and scam of military governance and draconian rulership took place, that has continued to hold the entire geographical expression hostage.
All right.
We are in hostage, and it has to stop.
All right. On the program, People, Politics, and Power, we examine all the issues. We have Nigeria on the table. We examine all that can indeed lead to the promotion of greater unity for the Nigerian people, and throw up some of the issues that can promote cohesion, fairness, justice, and equity amongst us, and chart the way forward. We bring the elderly, the political activists, we bring the young people, so that all of us can be on the same table. It does appear that the sing-song for taking a look at what Nigeria should be in future is at the center stage. Call it devolution of powers, call it restructuring, whatever language you want to call it. Everyone seems to be saying almost the same thing, that we need to indeed take a look at the structure. But will the government have the courage? Are they so scared? I mean, those in power, are they so scared that things could go wrong? Then how can the citizenry assist the government, as it were, to build in that confidence that we are not talking about a scattered Nigeria, a Nigeria that is off? That is what we do on the program. And when we come back in another 24 hours, we have more. We have another issue, another angle to it, and another set of guests. But before I go, I must thank Atoye Ario, a politician and public affairs analyst, a young man who is passionate about Nigeria, who believes in the unity and the oneness of Nigeria, and the Livingstone Wechie, a rights activist who speaks passionately about Nigeria, but says there's a proviso that we must come together and decide how to go forward. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being my guests on the program.
Thank you very much for
having us. No hate speech.
Thank you so much out there for taking up your time with us. And when we come back in under 24 hours, we'll have more for you. My name is Okiri Agbonsuremi. Do have a wonderful day, and thanks for staying with Africa Independent Television.